All right, Chevre. With the help of Hashem, we are learning Rosh Hashana Daf Lamed Dalid. We are heading into the second to last daf in the Masechta. We actually left off on Daf Lamed Gimel, Amid Beis, the second line from the top of the Amid. We're going to have a quick review of the sugya that we just learned recently regarding mitzvahs, tzrichos kavana, whether mitzvahs ain't tzrichos kavana, even if you hold that mitzvahs ain't tzrichos kavana, but nesasek will not be acceptable. So we're going to have the Gemara referring back to that. Then we're going to start the Mishnah on Daf Lamed Gimel Amid Beis. That's going to actually speak about the blowings, the blasts of the shofars. And as we today know that we blow what we call tashat, tarat, as we'll explain, Atkiya, Shvarim, Teruah, Atkiya. We blow Atkiya, Shvarim, Atkiya, Atkiya, Teruah, Atkiya. But we'll see how this evolved. It didn't begin this way. As we will be learning, really the Torah speaks about blowing Teruah. Then we learn that whenever God says to blow a Teruah sound, it also means that prior and post to the Teruah sound, there should be a Atkiya sound. So that's Atkiya, Teruah, Atkiya. Then we will see, all today we're going to learn in Braisas that there is a 3-time mention of blowing the Teruah, and amazingly, not regarding Rosh Hashana, but only when we put together the mitzvah of blowing shofar or Teruah on Rosh Hashana. In Rosh Hashana, Hashem mentions twice Teruah. Yom Kippur Yovel, the Torah mentions once blowing the Teruah. We're going to have a Hekesh, we're going to have a Gzeira Shava, we're going to combine them all together. We're going to have a total of 3 Teruahs. And again, every time Teruah means Tkiya, Teruah Tkiya. So that's going to mean that we got to blow the shofar. Here's how this is evolving 3 times. And we link it, we blow it once after the psukim of Malchiyos, after the psukim of Zechronos, and after the psukim of shofars. Then we're going to begin learning again today that it's not clear what Teruah means. Whether Teruah means what we call a Teruah, whether Teruah means what we call a Shvarim, as we're going to speak out, whether it means both together. So we blow them all together. Now, by the way, that doesn't explain all of the soundings that we make nowadays. Because if we begin with 3 times Tkiya, Teruah, Tkiya, the 3 times really becomes 9 times because we don't know what Teruah means. That's only 9. We're going to see how this became 30, how the 30 became 60, 90, how the 60, 90 became 100, and now we blow another 30. And by the way, this is part of the Chavivus mitzvah when we learned a while back that we confused the Satan. So one of the approaches we gave is that when the Satan sees how much we love the mitzvahs, that we go beyond to cover every angle, that type of love of God, which is expressed through the keeping the mitzvah so meticulously, transforms all of our sins into merits. That's the pshat we quoted. So the reason why the Satan gets confused, it's not that he knows. He didn't forget from last year. There's a Chassidish word that every year there's a new Satan. But one approach is when he sees how we ultimately transform all of our transgressions into merits, he stops making us sin. Because if he succeeds in making us sin, we're going to make that into a schus. We're going to have, if we'll have time, we're going to start the sugya towards the bottom of Daf Lamed Daled, Amud Aleph, turning to Daf Lamed Daled, Amud Beis. What were to happen if we didn't hear all of the soundings together? If they were spread out, if there was a huge pause in between each sounding, and we know regarding other areas that there is a limit of how much you can pause, like by Shema. If you take a little break, you're good. If you take too long of a break, the time that it will take you to finish the whole Shema, the whole Shemana Esrei, you got to go back to the beginning. We're going to see how this affects the blowings of the shofar and much more. So, Chavra, let us start. On Daf Lamed Gimel Amid Beis, we are in the second line from the top of the Amid. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam sha'ar panav. All right, so we learned in the Mishnah that the hamisasek, that someone who, let's touch the word, absent-mindedly is blowing the shofar, lo yatsa, that person did not fulfill his obligation. So says the Gemara, that implies that if you did not blow the shofar absent-mindedly, if you knew what you are blowing, you intended to blow the sounds of what we just mentioned, the tashrat, the tashat, the tarat, but you did not do it for the mitzvah. You were tekeya l'shir. You find these sounds the most beautiful melody. You made those sounds for a melody. You knew what you were doing. You had in mind to make those sounds, but it was not l'shem mitzvah. So that's already not mesasik. That's already yotza. And by the way, that's taka the machlokes we had. We said machlokes amoyroim, Rav Rabba or Rab Zera. Then we said it's a machlokes tanoim. Then this really plays its way out all the way through the Rishonim. So could we infer from our mitzvah, from our Mishnah, Lebe Mesayele to the sheet of Rava, that to Amad Rava Hatikea Lashir, as long as you did not blow it absent-mindedly, as long as you had in mind to make those sounds, even though you didn't do it l'shem mitzvah yatsa. So the Gemara says, not necessarily so, or we cannot say that our Mishnah is not like Rab Zera, because Dilma Toikea Lashir Nami Mesasik Karilei. How do you interpret the word Mesasik? So we kept on translating Mesasik means mamash absent-mindedly. You would just stop making sounds. So if exactly the right sounds came out, you're not Yoitza. That's for sure. The other Shitas will learn that even if you blew the shofar wanting to make the sounds of Tashrat, Tashat, Tarat, if you did not do it l'shem mitzvah, that's called Mesasik. That's the way they will learn in the Mishnah. So our Mishnah cannot be used for either way. It says in the Mishnah further that if a person heard the soundings of the blasts min ha misasik from someone who was blowing it again in an absent-minded way, also lo yatsa. So here again says the Gemara, let's infer from our Mishnah again, not like Rab Zera. Aval hashumeya min hamashmiya la'atzmai. What happens if someone is not blowing it l'misasik? Let's say I'm blowing the shofar for me l'shem mitzvah for me. I just didn't have you in mind. Mashma from the Mishnah, it's good. What's the only problem is if I'm blowing it misasik, but the moment I am not blowing it misasik, but only for me, then even you can be yoitza. So lema to have it to yufta the Rab Zera, as we just learned above, the Amar Rab Zera, that the Amar Rab Zera l'shamoy, Rab Zera told his attendant, oh, blow for me, have me in mind. Dichavin v'tak ali. Meaning, if you, intendant, Jew, if you blow it for you, good for you, but I'm not going to be yoitza. You have to have me in mind. The Mishnah seemingly is implying that you don't have to have the listener in mind. So the Gemara says, again, you cannot infer anything from our Mishnah. It's normal that the Mishnah, for the sake of symmetry, will use in one clause words similar to the clause prior. Maybe Dilma, either the Tani Reisha, the word Mesasik, Tama Nama Sefer Mesasik, but really, even if the blower blew it intentionally, intent l'shem mitzvah, if he did not have in mind the listener won't be yoitza. So again, our Mishnah cannot be used not to Rava, not to Rab Zera. And Chevre, here we start the Mishnah Seder Tkiyas. And we will see and hopefully experience how Torah Shebal Peh developed. And God willing, we'll mention towards the end of today's shiur the classic question. Then, not classical, the classic question, as was, how could there have ever been a doubt what Teruah means? In other words, let's say by Tefillin. By Tefillin, it makes sense. I don't see the parshiyas inside my Tefillin. So when you're going to tell me just wear what your father wore, I don't know exactly what my father wore. I only see the outside. When it comes to the soundings of the shofar, we blow it every year. How would we not know? We have a tradition, we have a Messiah. How did it happen? That the Teruah, we'll see, we don't know what Teruah means. So they did this, they did that. Then we'll see in Amoida says to do it all. This is a very important question, and we're going to quote at least one approach of Rab Hai Goin that's quoted by many of the Rishonim and so much more. But let's begin. This is how it begins. Seder Atkiya shalish al shalish. Every time you make soundings, it's going to be a set of three. And we call that chevra. Let's get familiar with the words. Atkiya, Teruah, Atkiya. That's three. But once Atkiya, Teruah, Atkiya, or Tarat is not enough. You got to blow that three times. We'll see in the Gemara where do we learn that from. We know that each one is connected to one of the Malchiyos, Zechroin, and Shofars, as we had in the previous sugya. That's how we're beginning. Shiur Atkiya. What's the length of Atkiya? So the din is Kishaloish Teruahs. The length of the Atkiya should be the length of 3 Teruahs. Now, what does that mean? There's so much to speak about, but let's keep on reading. Shiur Teruah, what's the length of a Teruah? Kishaloish Yevavos. Now, there are 2 words that we will continuously be using. Yevava, in English, it means a sab. A sab is a very short-sounded sound. That's a sab. Ganuche is called a in Yiddish a krechts, or maybe in English a moan or a good on oi. So ganuche is a longer sound, and Yevava is in Chazal a shorter sound. But in the Mishnah, in the times of the Mishnah, even though the Mishnah is using the words Yevavos, still not clear what that is. Says the Mishnah that the shiur of a teruah is like 3 Yevavos. Rashi, unlike many other Rishonim, a teruah is 3 Yevavos. The Hersverter, according to Rashi, a teruah is ta-ta-ta. Look inside Rashi over here. Shalosh Yevavos, Shalosh Koilos Ba'alma. But what type of Koilos? Kol Shehu. Kol Shehu means not the krechts, not the moan, right? Not the ganuche. So that's an interesting sheet. And we don't paskin this way. We paskin like other Rishonim that interpret that a teruah is 3 sets of 3 koilos, which is how we paskin. Well, it's a minimum of 9 times. But that's not Rashi. Now, what does that mean? So it means that the Atkiya, just the way we learn, the Atkiya should be like ta-ta-ta. The length of the Atkiya, according to Rashi, should be the same length that it takes to make 3 small sounds. So what does it mean? Shiur Atkiya k'shalosh teruos. It should be shiur Atkiya k'teruah. The Gemara is going to address that. What's the flow of the Mishnah doesn't go. Now there are so many different ways of learning, but we're going to learn as we try to always learn Gemara Rashi. Here Mishnah Rashi. Now before we go on, we have to learn a little bit of the Tosfos, and God willing, we'll get everything in today. So look inside the top Tosfos. Shiur teruah k'shalosh yevavos perush bekontres shalosh koilos ba'alma kolshu. Makes it clear. A teruah is 3 little sounds. And the Atkiya, that's Rashi. Atkiya should be the length of. As we have to get there today in the bottom of Daf Lamed Daled, that Rabbo enacted in the city of Kesari, and we follow his enactment, that to cover all the possibilities. Now, it's good to get familiar with these abbreviations. When we refer to what Tosfos is about to write, instead of the kuf, we write a taf for Atkiya. Tosfos and many Rishonim didn't write taf for Atkiya because teruah begins with the taf. So for the Atkiya, they write a kuf, which is the second letter of the word Atkiya. Kashrak, which means Atkiya, shvarim teruah Atkiya. Kashak, karak. Chevra, today we're going to call this kashrat, tashat, tarat. I hope no one is getting confused. Why? Because the mesupak, because we have it now, betruah dekro. What did Hashem mean when he writes the word teruah? If it means a teruah mamish, what we call a teruah, which is yalule yalul, means sab, little short sounds, or does the teruah of God mean shvarim, broken sounds, but broken sounds, each sound is longer, which is what we have Chazal call ganuchai ganach, groaning or moaning, or that was Rabbi Bo's addition, maybe it means both. Oy shvarim v'teruah. Now says Tosfos that a few down, I have to go quick. This is the chiddush of Tosfos, that whichever sound you are making, it should not be based on Rashi, that the minimum teruah on Rashi, not 9, 3, says Rashi, if you're going to make a shvarim, as long as you know what you just did? You turned the shvarim into a Atkiya. No, it's the shorter, the way you interpret the Mishnah will determine a big thing. If a teruah means and when you blow a sound that has the length of 3 little sobs, that's what the Mishnah calls a Atkiya. Says Tosfos, now that we're machmer, now that we do shvarim, you have to make sure that your shvarim sound doesn't have the length of ta-ta-ta. Because the moment it has the length of 3 sobs, you made it into a Atkiya. It's no longer a shvarim. Oy gewalt. The beauty of the minhag Chabad, that our shvarim is not a straight sound, it resolves all this. In other words, if a shvarim is just ta, then you got to be afraid that maybe your shvarim has the halachic length of a Atkiya. You ruined the whole thing. The moment you make a shvarim in a way where every sound of the shvarim is broken, then the sound of the shvarim is never similar to the tkiya. Let me go weiter. Another very big topic that Tosfos speaks about, I'm going to say it by heart, Pasha, we have to move, and that is that the length of the tkiya, prior and post, whatever the teruah means, should have the length of the inner stanza, which means that when you're blowing tkiya, shvarim, teruah, tkiya, the tkiya should have the length of both the shvarim and the teruah together, or longer, not shorter. The tkiya prior and post tashrak are longer tkiyas. The tkiya that's before the shvarim and the tkiya after the shvarim we call tashat, what Tosfos calls kashak. The tkiya should be shorter. It should have the length of the inner stanza. The tkiya before the teruah and after the teruah should have the length of that what you are blowing. That's the Tosfos over here and a lot more. Let's go back to in the Mishnah. Now, talk about Rishono, we had this quoted many times. So now that the Mishnah says that you blow beginning tarat, 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 right? You make 3 blasts, tkiya, teruah, tkiya, 3 times. Even though really, ideally, you should be doing it with the davening. That was the beginning. And Malchiyos, Zechrenish, and Shofars are 3 different brachas. So normally they are going to be separated one from the other. But this is originally. But if a person did not blow it in the davening, if the person just blew them all in one go, then you're yoitza, as the Mishnah will write in a line. So it's shayach that you're going to do tkiya, teruah, tkiya, tkiya, teruah, tkiya, tkiya, teruah, tkiya. When you blow it that way, the first tkiya will be a sound alone, tkiya. Then there'll be teruah. What's going to come afterwards? Tkiya. What comes after that tkiya? Neshamot tkiya. In other words, you're going to have 2 tkiyas together. Now that we established that the length of the tkiya is the sound, Larashi, of only 3 sabs, very short, let's say it's 2 seconds. So comes a blower and he's going to say, you know what? I have to do tkiya and tkiya. I'll blow 4 seconds. I'll make 1 tkiya that should be the end of the first stanza and also the tkiya of the next one. Says the Mishnah, no, nish good. Talk about Rishonim, Mashav, Krishniya, Kishtayim, Ein B'yodei Alachas. Most of the Rishonim learn, Ein B'yodei Alachas means it counts for the ending of the last clause. We already quoted the Maritz Geius, Big Shiti, he says you get nothing. But anyways, we're going to go according to most Rishonim, which is very good because today, okay, first of all, it's important for people to blow the shofar. What we just quoted in Tosfos is very important. To get into the habit of making an effort. Some people that I know, they have a watch and they have seconds and they push it, they know how long the shvarim teruah takes them. Let's say it takes them, 5 seconds. That's the length of their tkiya. It's beautiful that way. It's symmetric. It means every sounding takes the same duration of time. But if you don't do that and you make the tkiya longer, you're good. There's no Baal Tosef. There's no Baal Tosef here. People, like we're learning, the Torah says blow 9 sounds. 9 sounds. Tarat, tarat, tarat. Today it grew a beard. We grow 130 sounds. 130 sounds. Baal Tosef. There's no Baal Tosef. I'll give you an example. If God says eat a kazayis matzah, we end up eating what we make a ka'ara. We eat 5 kazaysim. That's not Baal Tosef. That's not Baal Tosef. God says put on tefillin. If I put on tefillin, I take off the tefillin. I put on the tefillin. Take off the tefillin. Not Baal Tosef. If I take off my talis, put on my. That's not Baal Tosef. Just to make that clear. If you blow a long sound of the tkiya, you're good. You're good. But it only counts for 1. If you made it into 1 blast, it counts for 1 blast. Right. Now, here the Mishnah is giving a case where, again, originally, like the Mishnah writes in the first line, the shofar is shalosh, shalosh, shalosh. That means 3 times tarat. Tarat, 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 but ideally not together, not back to back, because it lechatchila did not begin with what we call tkiyas d'meyushav. It did not begin with us blowing the shofar in one go before Musaf. It began by blowing it together with saying the verses of Malchiyah, Zechrenish, and Shofars. And that was a sugi that we just came off. And these are 3 different brachas. So they're separated. Says the Mishnah, it's not essential. So for example, when you were davening Shemona Esrei, when you were saying the brachas of Musaf, you didn't have a shofar. You didn't have a shofar. Now you get the shofar, you can blow them all together. You don't have to repeat the Shemona Esrei, which is mamash what we do. And only then you get a shofar. Say that. Toikeya umaria v'toikeya. that's called Tkiya, Teruah Tkiya, 3 times, back to back, Sholish Pa'amim, consecutively. It doesn't need to be in the davening. It's not essential. It's ideal, not essential. Now, the final topic of the Masechta, and this is something that we will discuss more in tomorrow's daf and the Siyum. The Mishnah now is not talking about the shofar. The Mishnah now is speaking about the shliach tziburs, davening out loud, using the rule of shomeya ka'oina means that me listening with kavana will make it tantamount to as if I said those words myself. And as we came through the sugya yesterday of all of the psukim that you have to mention and all of the restrictions, they did not have a machzer. You needed to be a baki in Tanach to put together a Shemona Esrei. Not everyone knew how to do it. So for sure, if I don't know how to daven Musaf and I listen to the Bal Tefilla, Avada, that's good. The question is, if I know how to daven Musaf, could I lechatchila listen to the Shliach Tzibur, or should I lechatchila daven on my own? That's the last topic, the last machlikas in the Mishnah. Tanakama says, Keshem shliach tzibur chayiv, kach kol yochel yochid chayiv. Chayiv means not to blow, not to blow. To daven Shemona Esrei, when it comes to the blowing of the shofar, I know we mentioned it, just to mention it again, we're coming towards the end. There's a big machlokas. Rishonim, is the mitzvah to blow, is the mitzvah to listen. L'chu'ura, by the fact that our nusach habracha follows those Rishonim that say that it's not litkoya, which is the nusach that they made in Yom Kippur Yovel in the base in Sanhedrin, but it's l'shmoya. The mitzvah is to listen. I'll give you a big nafkamina. What happens if, God forbid, someone stole a shofar and they used a stolen shofar? So in the Yerushalmi, there's a special pasuk that says you're okay. Question is, do you need that pasuk? Why would you not need that pasuk? Of course you need that pasuk. Because since we paskin that the mitzvah is only to hear the sound is not stolen. The shofar is stolen. So by the fact that the Yerushalmi needs a pasuk to say the Yoytze mashma from the Yerushalmi, the mitzvah is to blow. If the mitzvah is to blow, then it's more problematic if it's stolen. But anyways, coming back over here, we're not speaking here about the shofar. The mitzvah is to hear. Even the blower, the mitzvah is for him to hear. Here at Shemona Esrei, Tanakama holds, if you know how to daven Musaf, daven Musaf. Rabban Gamliel says, no, that even if you know how to daven Musaf, lechatchila, you can rely on listening to the Shliach Tzibur. Shliach Tzibur Moises Rabbi Yudei Chavos. And now this machlekes we'll speak about tomorrow, God willing. Okay, says the Gemara. The Mishnah, again, the problem with the opening line of the Mishnah, not the first clause, that it's sholosh, sholosh. The problem is that the Mishnah says shiur tkiya ki sholosh teruos. Then the Mishnah says no, that the shiur tkiya is like 1 teruah. Because if 1 teruah, we're learning the Mishnah Rashi. If 1 teruah is 3 sabs, then the length of the tkiya is like 1 teruah. What does it mean? Of 3. And not only is that like a stira, but there's a braisa of v'hatanya shiur tkiya is taka only like 1 teruah. Now, by the way, by us, we paskin that a teruah should be at least 9 sabs. And taka, that's the length. That's the length. But whatever the length of the teruah is, 1 tkiya should have the length of 1 teruah. Not 1 tkiya the length of 3 teruahs. Says the Gemara Abaya, no. Tana didon kachashav tkiya the kula bave. The teruah is the kula bave. No, it's now that we established that we blow 3 times. It began. Tarat, tarat, tarat. Every time you blow tarat, every time you blow a tkiya, the tkiya should have the length of 1 teruah. The tkiya has the length of 1 teruah. The clause of the Mishnah means, and every time it has to be that way. Every time of the 3 times. Don't think that if you did it the first time good, then you don't have to be careful in the length of the tkiya. Then you can make it even shorter. No. The braisa, tana the braisa, kachashiv chad bava. When you blow a tkiya, it should have the length. That was the Tosfos. Whatever you will today, nowadays, blow for the teruah, whether it's shvarim teruah, whether it's shvarim, whether it's teruah, the tkiya that comes, that sandwiches the teruah, prior and post, should have the length of that which comes in between. Every time. Right. Shiur teruah kigimel yevavos. Now, here the Mishnah uses the words Yevava, and I know that nowadays we interpret Yevava Sab. And Rashi types kolduhu. A coil kolduhu means a little sound. But there are other times that we use the word Shvarim. As now we interpret the word Shvarim as something a little bit longer. Correct. So our Mishnah and that Tana appear to disagree. Yes, they don't agree. Now we're beginning that, we're going to see that from the beginning of time, already according to Rabbi Hai Goyen, people were allowed to choose how to blow the teruah, either like this or like that. That was up to us. And mistama, it had to do with how do I cry? Everyone cry, like every person that makes too much l'chaim, what happens to them? This guy goes dancing, this guy goes crying. The same thing. When you go crying, how do you cry? So there was an option. So it says 3 shvarim. 3 shvarim means that they're longer segments. The shvarim is a longer segment sound. So Amar Abaye, pligi, because it says Yoim Teruah Yelochem, and the Targum interprets Yoim Yevava Yelochem, and we have no idea what Teruah means. So you look at the Targum, we don't know what the Targum means. However, you know where we find the source of the meaning of Yevava? Look how the irony. According to our version, Uksiv be'imei de Sisra, our arch enemy, when he was going to fight against the Jewish people, and he went into the tent of Yoel, and she killed him. And it says that the mother of Sisra was looking outside the window, waiting for her son to return. And her Chaveritas told her, don't worry, he just won the war against the Yidden, God forbid, and he's plundering. He's going to come back here. He's having a good time. And she began to sense at the end of the day that her son ain't returning. And the Torah says, it says in Shoiftim that she was looking, Ba'ad hachaloi nishkava, she was looking out of the window, Vatiyabev, aim, sister, and she began to cry. That's how we know B'chlal that Yevava means to cry. But how do people cry? The Tana that says Shvarim, he understands that crying means the mother of Sisri was groaning, she was krechzing, longer sounds. Umar Savar, our Tana holds Yalula Yalul. Now the irony that we learn how to make a sound from the mother of Sisra cannot be underlined. You have no idea how many drushes. For all the pulpit rabbis, I'm a chayid, have a field day with this. The only tragedy for all of the pulpit rabbis, myself included, is that there is a girsa that doesn't write Aim Sisra, it writes our mother Sarah. No one quotes that because then they lose the whole speech. So just to know that there's many that are goyres that when Sarah Imenu heard on Rosh Hashana that Avram Avinu took Yitzchak to the Akedah, and the way Hasidim teach, and then she heard that she did not shecht him, why did she cry? So first of all, to be aware of that girsa. Now, if the girsa is Aim Sisra, so Takavi Kumtis, how can it be that we're copying the soundings of the shofar from the mother of Hitler? That's what Sisra was. So just there's so many classic responses to this. The Marimi Pano writes like this. He writes that it says in Sanhedrin that Mebnei Banav Shel Sisra Lomdu Torah Bebnei Brak. And who is that Rabbi Akiva? And as we know that really one of the Yael did the Aveda Lishma. I mean, she had a relation with him 7 times over. That's how she got him to fall asleep before she cut his head off. So she got pregnant. And from that came Rabbi Akiva. So the mother of Sisra represents, the mother Bechlal in Tanach refers to the Shechina. That when we look at something not good, most of us see not good. The Eibishter sees the potential good in everything, which is really the avoid of Rosh Hashana. That's part of tshuva. That even in Azah Sisra, he gave birth to Rabbi Akiva. And she was crying, being afraid that no one will see that potential. It was seen and was extracted. Now, after she got pregnant, there was no need for a Sisra. But the real avoid of tshuva is Hisapcha is finding the good, the spark of good, even in the bad. Let's go weiter.
In the Gersa that has Sarah, what do they do with this whole pasuk?
They don't have this pasuk. I love it. Okay, Tana Rabbanan. Now let's go. I know it's late. I love this. You have to learn how to love this. From here all the way to the bottom of Daf Lamed Daled, before we come back to this Rababo who made a takana in Kaisari to do Tashrat and Tashat, Tarat, this whole thing, we're gonna find now the sources in oral Torah. How do you know it's a shofar, not a trumpet? And how do you know 3 times? And the kitzur will be, nowhere does it say 3 times in one place. It says twice, 2 psukim, one in Emor, one in Pinchas for Rosh Hashana. Yom Teruah. It says regarding Yovel and Yom Kippur, Teruah. So first of all, we're going to put them all together. Is Darai Truas. Then we're going to have to find other limudim that whenever you blow a trua, you don't blow a trua. Hashem doesn't mean it. He means a trua means sandwiched in between tkiya prior, tkiya post. How do you know that? There's two different approaches from two different tanoim. That will be the whole amid, and let's get moving. So Tana Rabbanan, Kaidim Kol, how do you know that it's a shleifer? Trua means to make a sound. Whether the sound means a sab or whether it means a krechts. Trua doesn't mean the instrument. It doesn't say a shleifer. Answers the Gemara, you're right. By Rosh Hashana doesn't say a shofar, but in Parshas Bahar, when we're speaking about the mitzvah that we learned, this begins on the Sanhedrin. Then it goes b'chol artzichem. We just had that above. Ultimately, everyone blows. There by Yovel Yom Kippur, it says va'avarta shofar teruah. So the teruah sound of Yovel comes from a shofar. So very nice. That's for Yovel. Says the Braisa ainli ela b'Yovel. But Rosh Hashana minayin Talmud loimer. Oh, since it says v'chodesh hashvi, where by Yovel. Now, the Torah there speaks about Yom Kippur. We already know Yom Kippur is Machodesh Hashvi from Parshas Pinchas. So when Hashem writes in Bahar by Yovel that you blow it on Yom Kippur, which is in the 8th month, just like Yom Kippur, I already know it's extra, superfluous. To tell you that whenever the shofar is blown on the 7th month, now true, there we're speaking about something that happens once in 50 years. But we know that shofar is blown every year in the 7th month. When? On Rosh Hashana. All of the sounding should be similar. Similar here means it should be coming from the same instrument. Shiur called teruah shol chodesh hashvi zeh kozem. Okay, Aleph, base. How do you know? Teruah? Teruah means yevava. How do you or ganuchay? How do you know that you have to blow a atkiya before? Then we'll get to the kiyah. Minayin shebshut lefaneh. Second to last line on daf lamed gimel lamed base. Talmud loimer. Since it says we're still learning in the Bahar, we're learning Yovel. The ha'avarta shofar teruah, it could have said vitokato. So the ha'avarta, Chazal understand it means a straight sound. A straight sound should be heard. Then a teruah. Because there it says taviru shofar, nachamo. The word the mamash extra. Oh, so again, so now that you have a remez, it's amazing. We learned the instrument from Yovel. We learned pshuta lefadam all from Yovel. The last line, the ainli alaba Yovel, but Rosh Hashana minayin. So nachamo, Talmud loimer, it says in Bahar that Yom Kippur is in the 7th month. B'chodesh hashvi, daf lamed daled, ain't Talmud loimer b'chodesh hashvi, mamash extra, right? Look inside the top Rashi, the whole kosav lon bekama mekaymis the yom kippurim b'chodesh hashvi. Who? And here it says we're here in Bahar in Yovel Yom Kippur. It says Yom Kippur. The moment you say Yom Kippur, I know it's in the 7th month. So ma Talmud loimer b'chodesh hashvi, it's extra, and this is called, my friends, a hekish. To tell you, shiur kol teruah hachodesh hashvi zeh kozem. Now we go further. How do you know that? So teruah, yoim teruah. So teruah means tkiya, teruah, tkiya. But what was the first line we had in our Mishnah? It's biblically 3, which means 9. Midrash, it's 9. That's it. Imagine from the 9 it became 100 plus 30 la'arve vasot. U'minayin l'sholish sholish. All right. And Nachrashi adds, and that's the 1 is by Malchios, 1 by Zechronis, 1 by Shoifrois. So Talmud loimer says the Braisa. Now we're going to put together all the psukim. Number 1, v'ha'avarto shofar teruah. Guys, we should remember these words. These are the words written in Bahar regarding Yovel Yom Kippur. Number 2, this is a pasuk in Emer regarding the normal Rosh Hashana. Every year Rosh Hashana, Shabbosin, Zichroin, teruah. Then it says in Pinchas, zum dritten Mal, Yom Teruah Yelochem. Total of 3. Now, so what? So Talmud loimer, shvi, l'gzeira shava. And now we have a problem. Why do you need gzeira shava? We already said that it should all be the same. The Gemara is going to ask that. You have a gzeira shava. Haketzad, shalosh, shein teisha. Right? Mishnah is shtayim, shein arba. Here you have a shalosh, shein teisha. And now concludes the Braisa. And now is like, this is the second topic of our Mishnah, that what's the length of the Tkiya? Shiur Tkiya should be the length of the Teruah. And again, we're learning the way Rashi learns. What is a Teruah? What is a Teruah? 3 shvarim. And what's the Chaf? Right? 3. To tell you can add. At least. It can be more. Doesn't have to be 3 shvarim. Or today, we say that by Yosabs it's 9. It's not 9 and not more. It's 9 and not less. That's the chaf. That's the way we take a pasuk. Okay. End of quote. Now we have the problem, like we mentioned. If you have a hekish, why do you need a gzeira shava? Simply by the fact that it says in Parshas Bahar, which is superfluous, and that's enough to tell you that all of the blowings of every 7th month are all the same. And v'hashtum, when it comes to the last topic of how do you know that every time you blow 3 sets, why do you have to use the gzeira shava? Answers the Gemara, indeed, hachika amar. Ilav gzeira shava, even without the gzeira shava, I would use a hekish. We are following the many Rishonim that learn that the only limud of the Yud Gimel Midos that you need to hear from your teacher is only a Gzeira Shava. L'kula alma Gzeira Shava ein adam dan Gzeira Shava elam kein lamed mirabe. Can you imagine? Ein l'davar soif vayomer vayomer Hashem Hashem. You have to. Everyone knows that a kal v'chomer you can do by yourself. The big machlokes is what about the other Yud Gimel Midos? Rashi here, the Gilin Hashas points out that Rashi contradicts himself from Sukkah. Here we're learning not only Kal V'chomer can you make by yourself, you can make a hekish by yourself. So what the Braisa means, really we have a Gzeira Shava. Even if we would not have a Gzeira Shava, that's the pshat over here. We would learn it on our own from a hekish. However, but now that we have a Gzeira Shava, so a Kesha Litzak. Nekuda. So Atkan, if you ask a Yid, where do we get this? Forget about what we do now. How did it begin? Rosh Hashana compared to the blowings of the shofar on Yom Kippur on the Yovel. Says the Gemara, you should know that there is another Tanach. And he learns it out from the trumpets that Moshe Rabbeinu made. That was uniquely a mitzvah on Moshe Rabbeinu, right? In Parshas Baha Alois Chatzei Lecha Chatzoitzrois. And it was used for 2 reasons. Either to gather the people or to signal that we are beginning a journey. One of the 2. So says the Gemara, V'hai Tana, there's another Tana that Taka also uses a Gzeira Shava, but not a Gzeira Shava from Bahar, from Yom Kippur Yovel, but Gzeira Shava from Midbar. Midbar again is referring to the trumpets that was uniquely used by Moshe Rabbeinu. And now let's learn this Batanans, and then we're going to have a second Baraisa. Simple. Then the Gemara is going to point out why didn't one use the other. Each one has something that the other one saw as to be imperfect. The Tanya. Now this is a pasuk in Baal Loischa. Utekatem teruah. The words utekatem teruah could have 2 meanings. Either utekatem teruah can mean blast a teruah. You can touch it that way, or you can touch it, make a tkiya and make a teruah. That's the teruah with the tkiya prior. It can mean one or the other. Says the Braisa. You know what it means? Not option number 1 that I mentioned. It doesn't mean make 1 teruah blast. No, it means taka 2. Tkiya and teruah. Tkiya b'fnei atzma, v'teruah b'fnei atzma. So asks the Braisa, how do I know? Ato oimer tkiya b'fnei atzma, v'teruah b'fnei atzma, oy einay ella. Maybe the words in Bahal Loischa was utekatem teruah means mach ein teruah, sound the teruah. Tkiya utruah achasi. Answers the Braisa, that can't mean read the psukim, put it in context. Like we just mentioned, that Moshe Rabbeinu's trumpets were here for 2 reasons. Either to gather the people, or to signal that we are beginning to journey. So it says, when Moshe Rabbeinu was blowing the trumpets only to gather the people, it says, it says, only tkiya and not teruah, which means there's only 1 sound. We're not going into which one, only 1 sound. So now have a oimer that over here, when he's not gathering the people, when he's singling, when he's telling people to start traveling, the psukim, right? First the group that the achonim, the ones that were east began to go, and then the ones that were, I think, on the north began to go. East, south. Okay, so that's the say that there. So when it comes to journeying, so at least it's simple. Utkatem teruah means a tkiya na teruah. Uminayin shapshuta lefaneha. How do you know which seder? How do you know which one comes first? Talmud loimer, utekatem teruah. Follow the order, not utoratem tekiya. No, first tekiya then teruah. Okay, good. Now minayim shapshuta lachaneo, because there it says in another pasuk teruah yiskau gavaldik. So actually, when he gathered the people, there was 1 sound. When we're journeying, tkiya, teruah tkiya.
All right, quick question. Just
yes, quick.
Overall, the tkiya shofar, based on all these limudim, do we hold that it's a biblical obligation?
To blow 9 sounds, yeah. 9, yeah, and anything beyond.
Gairaisa. Okay.
Now, Rabbi Shmuel ben the last limud, only the last. No, it's he goes with everything. That it means 2 sounds, that it has to be tkiya teruah. But when you are asking, how do you know that after the teruah there was the tkiya? I don't need your teruah yisko. Ain't it tzarech? Why not? Because when it says utekatem teruah shenis, again it's east, and then it's south. That was the seder. So it says he made the soundings. The Yidden that were living, the 3 Shvatim that were living in the east began to travel, and then he blew again. Now I know that the word shenis is not needed. It makes sense because Taka, first he made 1 soundings, and people that lived in the east began to travel. All right, and then he blew again. The Torah didn't have to say the word again. We would understand it means again. Shenis is a remes. Shenis means that for every teruah there are 2 tkiyas. Matam shenis zebonaav shekol nokem that it says teruah. There's got to be a second tkiyah, not only tkiyah post, tkiyah prior. Now, so all of this, see, forget about Yovel. This is the way we journeyed. It's amazing, and not even with the shofar, with the trumpet. Okay, but that was in the midbar. Ainli elaba midbar, but Rosh Hashana minayin. Talmud loimer trua. Ooh, yavik zayda shava. Trua like shava. I want you to know like this: b'kitzur, when you make zayda shavas, there's something called the Gezerah Shava Mufna Mitzad Echad, Mufna Mishnei Tzodadim. This is the general rule. If 2 topics logically are very compatible, we don't always need for the word to be extra. Whenever it's not compatible, here it's not compatible simply by the fact that I just mentioned, one is trumpets, one is a shofar. At least one word has to be used only for the Gezerah Shava. That will be a problem. Why will that be a problem? Because how did we get to the 3 sets? Because it says Trua. It doesn't even say it in the same place. 1 teruah, so far we learned, was in Yovel, Yom Kippur, and 2 times in Rosh Hashana. We're going to need one of them for this Gezerah Shava. Just have that in mind. Okay. So now, v'sholish teruos nemru b'Rosh Hashana. Guys, the words of Rosh Hashana is not dafke lav. It's not. We don't have 3 in Rosh Hashana. Like we mentioned, we have 2 in Rosh Hashana, and we have 1 by Yovel. It says the first one is Parshas Emor. Shabbos and Zichron teruos taka Rosh Hashana. Number 2 is Pinchas. Vayter Rosh Hashana. Yom teruah. Number 3, here you go. But it's fine. So 3 times a total of teruah. So really continues the Braisa like we just mentioned. The moment we are making this Gezerah Shava to Chatzoytris to the Midbar, and therefore 1 teruah is needed. So according to this Tana, Danny, that's to answer your question. I said 9 is Midoy Raisa. According to this Tana, it's not true. It's only 6 Midoy Raisa. Because since 1 teruah is needed for the Gezerah Shava, biblically, Midrabanan they said it. Nemru, really, but Rosh Hashana Shtayim. Really, it's only 2 teruahs. Midivrei Torah. And the third, the achas means the third teruah, which comes with it, tkiya before and tkiya afterwards, that's midivrei soifrim. And the Braisa teaches, Shabbos in zichrein teruah, Parshas Emoir, listen, v'ha'avar to sofer teruah, Parshas Bahar, Yom Kippur, Yovel, that's not needed. Good, that's the teruah. But the Yom teruah yelochem, now that we have to make a Gezerah Shava linking shofar, linking yovel with chatzoitzreis, they're not similar. You need to have a Gezerah Shava mufna. That is needed for the limud biblically. So that is really the answer to your question is that if you compare shofar, Rosh Hashana Yom Kippur to the midbar, biblically you only have to make 6 sounds. Midrabanan they added another 3. And then did it grow up here? Now, Rabbi Shmuel, Banachmeni Yom Rabbi Yonasan, I'll tell you more than that. Really, according to this Tana, only 1 is midivrei Torah and shtayim midivrei soifrim. And he says, "V'habar to shofar teruah." How ironic! Yovel, that's midivrei Torah. Shabbos and zichrein teruah, which is Parshas Emoid and Chevra the second widest line, and teruah and v'yom teruah yelochem and Parshas Pinchas, both are needed biblically. Now midivrei soifrim, everyone agrees that it began with shalosh. Shalosh. But let's see, hold on. Why do we need to have 1 of the 3 also? So like this. No, the Gemara doesn't have to say that one of them is needed for the Gezerah Shava, that we know. But what's the Talmud? The Belelli. So the words yoim is to tell you that the mitzvah of blowing the shofar is only by day and not by night. Now ve'idach, that didn't say that achas midivrei Torah, because that is not needed, because he knows it. By yoim v'lebelayla min nolan. I'll tell you how. Because for Yom Kippurim, says the Gemara, the other Tanach, Yom Kippurim, Yalef, Nigvanav Minel Pshulor. You know, if you anyways have to learn something from Pashas Bahar, why didn't you learn all of it from Pashas Bahar? Oh, it's why doesn't the second Tana, what's wrong with what we began in the bottom of Lamed Gimel Lamed Beis? Why don't we learn everything from Yovel? So he tells you why. Because if you remember the Bryce, it says Avarta Tavirum. Both of these words, he learned something else. Avarta Taviru le mashmalahu. You know, you can't learn Tkiya before and Tkiya after from there. Why not? So from the word Vahavarta, we had this above. He will learn that which Rav Masna taught us. What did Rav Masna teach us? That if you take a shofar and you boil it in water and you make it very soft and you manipulate it by what? By making the wide side narrow and the narrow side wide, you're not yotzem. Where did we learn that from? From the words Vahavarta, the way it was worn on the animal. Vahavarta derachavarosai. If we would not have had the comparison to Bahar Loischa, if we only would have learned it from the pasuk in Bahar, we would have erroneously said that you know what the words ta'aviru means. Ta'aviru doesn't mean you don't have to blow the shofar. How do you know you have to blow the shofar? Carry it in your hand. We don't blow the lulav. In other words, if you only would have learned it from there, you Bechlal would have argued wrongfully that the Medafnish wasn't, it's only Na'avre Biyad. So that's why you need to learn now by the Chatzoitzroitz. There it's clear, the Torah says to blow it. That's why you have to go to Valoischa. Now you have to know the other Tana. Ve'idach, the Rav Masna, our Tana, the Aflama Gimel Lamed Beis, also has the limit of Rav Masna, that if you invert the shofar, it's not good, but he learns two things from the same word. V'havarta chevra means to make a straight sound. But you can also learn, don't flip it. You know why? Because to make a straight sound, the Torah could have used the regular lashon of utakatem. That Rav Masna mi deshana b'diburei. Normally you write utakatem. And the Torah writes not utakatem, but v'ha'avarta. So you learn two things. Number two, the words taviru biyad loy matzah samra. You never would make that mistake. You know why? Because the gamar avara from Moshe Rabbeinu, guys, not b'ha'loischa. We already find the words ha'avara where after we began to donate money for the Mishkan and Pashas Vayakel, and Moshe Rabbeinu says, "Vayiviru koil b'machna." Enough. This is Yom Kippur Yovel. And it says over there in Pashas Vayakel, "Veitzav Moshe vayaviru koil b'machna." So we already know that the words v'ha'avarta doesn't mean to carry something; it means to articulate, to make a sound. Malahal b'koil, afkan b'koil. Now let's go pum faker. So now that we explain why Ulahai Tana the Maisa Midbar. No, it's the one the Daflamed Gimel, the Tana that we have over here in Daflamed Dalet. If you tackle learn it from Pashas Baha Aloischa, so I have a kasha now. Imalahalan Chatzoitzroitz, Afkan Chatzoitzroitz. You know, we have a concept of Eng Zeder Shabbal Mechza. Like you compare it to, so maybe you should blow trumpets. It's amazing. Now the answer would be, what's the answer? The answer is that the Torah uses the word shofar, but where does the Torah use the word shofar? By Yom Kippur, by Yovel. So if we learn it from Yovel, there's no question. But if you ikir limit us from Moshe Rabbeinu and Bahal Loischa, so taka blow trumpets. So here you have to go to Tehillim. In other words, which normally we try to learn everything from Chamish Chum Shetleira, but here he's going to hold, since it says in Tehillim, how many times did we already have this? Tiku b'chodesh shofar. Here it says shofar. It's not clear the fadish that this is about Rosh Hashana, but the Torah adds Tehillim b'keseh l'yom chagenu. And how do we darshan this pasuk? Right, we had this on Daf Ches plus Eizehu Chag, which Yom Tov is on the day that the moon is still hitting. More even, Shavuos is not in the beginning of the month. That's the only one Yom Tov. Have a right, Rosh Chodesh Kislev later, and now we have Have a Omer Zeh Rosh Hashana, and it says in Tehillim Shofar. That's how you know it. Good, amazing. This is the best Gemaras, but now we're coming back now to Amirai. So it's clear. 3 times Teruah. Every time Teruah, one prior, one post. So that should be tarat, tarat, tarat. Genuk. We also already had today on Lamagim Lamed Beis, no, that there was a machlokes tanoim. What does teruah mean? But now says the Gemara asking Rabbi Abohu when he was the Rav, the Mara the Asra in the city called Kesare. It says today in Eretz Yisrael they told me it's a very wealthy city. Allah give him. Rabbi Abohu had a good Kesaria. He had a good position. He made a takana that Tkiya Shloisha Shavarim and the Teruah and then the Tkiya. Oh, it's until him, as we mentioned above, either Tkiya Shvarim Tkiya or Tkiya Teruah Tkiya. He made a new thing. Tkiya Shvarim Teruah Tkiya. What we call Tashrat, or what many Rishonim call Kashrak. Again, I'm saying the word Kuf because the Taf also stands for a Teruah, not to confuse them. What kind of takon is that? If when Hashem says, right, so how do we get to here? Let's go to our Girsa. It says Yom Teruah. The Targum says Yom Teruah means Yom Yevava, right? We know from the mother of Sisra, Yevava means crying. We have a question, how do people cry? Either they moan or they sob. So, if Yevava means Yilule Yalel, sobbing the shorter sounds, so then you should do Tkiya, Teruah Tkiya. If the Yom Teruah, Yom Yevava means Ganuchai Ganach, to moan, which are longer sounds. Oi. So then La'aved, Tkiya, Shloisha Shvarim, Utkiya. So what's this? Shvarim and Teruah, and for explaining, we're beginning to explain what happened. That Misapkele, there was a doubt. So you know what he did? He did both. Hold on. Maskav Rabbi Avira, I don't understand. He had a doubt. But if it's one or the other, if it means Yilulei, if it means a short sobbing, we just learned all of these limudim that prior to the teruah, right before you have to make a tkiya. The shvarim is a hefsek. We don't know, but God knows. If it means to make a teruah, what we call a teruah, so the shvarim is a hefsek. Come mafsek shloisha shvarim bein teruah letkiya. So the Gemara says, yeah. Don't think that all Rabbi Bo said is just to blow tashrat 3 times. No. And a chanami, you also have to blow the 100 of Atkiya through Atkiya 3 times. 3 times. There is such a possibility. So he also agrees you got to blow tarat. Hold on. Maskav Ravina, we're not done yet. Maybe the God, when he said Hashem, when he said to Yom Teruah, Yom Yevava, means dafka only ganucha. And if it only means a shvarim, we also learn from the Braisos above, every teruah has to have post atkiya. Nothing is allowed to interrupt. We're going to learn in the next sugya, time is acceptable. But that's because you're not making other sounds. If you're not putting another sound, that's a problem. So, and if you verstehst, the Gemara clarifies. No, you also do tashat. By the way, according to the Seder of the Gemara, it sounds like that his takana was to do tashrat, tarat, and tashat. We don't do it that way. We do tashrat, tashat, tarat. But let's leave it. Now, hold on. So the Gemara says, Ela Rabbi Abo, my asking. No, he had a doubt. So at best, the Gemara is asking, let Rabbi Bo say, do this and do that. Do tashat, do tarat. In other words, like, why did he even say to do tashrat? No, answers the Gemara. This was his chiddush. Rabbi Bo says, maybe it meant both. Dilma gonach v'yolil. Maybe you got to do both. So so now you have 3 options. So you got to do all 3. What's the Gemara's next question, Chevra? There's a 4th option. What's the 4th option? Tkiya. Hello. Teruah. Shvarim. Tkiya. That's also a possibility. Imagine then, we would still be blowing from Rosh Hashana. Tkiya, Teruah, Shloisha Shvarim, Tkiya, because maybe first Yalul and then Ganach. The Gemara says that's not an option because Tamad Milsa, the way people cry is first Ki Misra Beinish Milsa Bereisha Ganach. When God forbid there's a calamity that befalls a person, the first the emotional reaction is, oi. And then you begin sobbing. Father Yalil. So now, let me speak out the following. Okay, so here is where the Rabbi Goyen and everyone, not everyone, many of the Rishonim quote him, say, how can there ever have been a doubt, a suffix in something that we do every year? So Rabbi Goyen says that when Moshe Rabbeinu came down, he told us we can either do this or we can do that. We have options. The problem with the options is that the people, the Hamoin Am, these are the words of Rabbi Goyen. If I came from a village where they always did just the Teruah, and then I'm going to hear another group of people just doing the Shvarim, I will think they did it wrong. So he made an enactment where everyone should do everything. And Taka, Rabbi Goyen says that there were communities that it was not that known, that did both. There were always people that did all of these options. He regulated it by saying let everyone do everything. And then he speaks about the idea of having two Torahs, how we don't want for people to observe the mitzvahs differently. And we know that some of Yiddishkeit, we have Ashkenazim, we have Sfardim, but this limited, like Beishamai Beisilul was the worst. Like we're not allowed to follow Beishamai, Beishamai Marka Beisilul and Mishnah, the concept of everyone being more or less on the same page. Now, the big question here amongst the Rishonim is that when he said to blow a shvarim and a teruah, that's the Rabbeinu Tam over here, Rabbeinu Tam says that it has to be separated with a breath. Atkiya, shvarim, a breath doesn't mean that you have to remove the shofar from your right lip. A breath means that breathe in to be mafsik between the shvarim and the teruah. Then Ramban says that you are not supposed to make any breath hefsik between them. Minik Chabad is being that the kitzur. So really, how many soundings did we learn about? We learned about 30 soundings. If we're going to count the shvarim and the teruah separated, so it's 444, 333, 333. Use your calculator if you need. That's 30 koilos. Really, it began blowing it by Shmoina Esrei, by the Shliach Tzibur. From there we went, even when we're davening the silent Shmoina Esrei, make again all of these sounds. So 30 became 60. Then we added what we call tkiyas de meyushev, which are the tkiyas, the soundings that we blow before we begin musaf. The word meyushev means, because even though the minig is that everyone stands, but you are allowed to sit. The blower has to stand. People are allowed to sit. When you daven Shemona Esrei, the Amidah, people are standing. That's just the way we differentiate with what we call tkiyos de meyushev, especially based on what the Mishnah says, that you don't need to do it in Shemona Esrei. The case in the Mishnah was you're davening musaf, you didn't have a shofar. So it's fine. So we blow 30 blasts before, then we blow 30, then we blow 30, and the toisvahs that we, again, to go back to the Flamed Gimel days, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 lines under the Gemara. So toisvah says, going back to the mother of Sisra, that we have a tradition, keneged meya po'ois, the poya imei de Sisra, that when she was sobbing that her son is not back, she cried 100 times. So what do we do now? We add 10 soundings when? By the Kaddish Teskabel, which is also great because theoretically it keeps everyone quiet even until the middle of Kaddish Teskabel. That's 100. And then we added another 30. I want to just begin. I want to begin the bottom line over here. Talk about the Shoyno Mashach Lishniya Kishtayim. So let's begin with Rabbi Yechanan. Yeah, you got it? Shlomo, the last line, just to open up the sugya. This is what we're going to take off tomorrow. That Shoma, Teisha, Daf Lamed Dalod Amid Beis. We turn the page, we feel good. Shoma, Teisha, Tkiyas, Betesha, Shos, Vayoim. Let's go back to the beginning. It began with 9 sounds. Tarat, tarat, tarat. Says Rabbi Yechanan, if someone heard all of the sounds, but they were not juxtaposed, forget about the fact that they were not in the musaf. That doesn't matter. You heard of Atkiya, then later you heard another sound, then later there was a big pause in between one and the other. It took you the whole day. Says Rabbi Yochanan Yatza. That's the new topic. And as we will see, why Yatza? Why in other areas you're not Yatza? And then eventually we're going to come to the final machlokes we have in the Mishnah regarding the Shliach Tzibur, the Chatchila B'di'evet. And tomorrow we are making a siyum with the help of Hashem.
So that's why Chabad uses the Shavor and
Exactly. That's the